Good morning, students. Good morning to all. So, on last day, we have studied about the Reserve Bank of India and the functions of Reserve Bank of India. So, today also, just we will study what we have studied on last day, and we will go to the next concept. So, on last day, we have studied about the functions of Reserve Bank of India. So, under the functions of Reserve Bank of India, the three types of the function is undertaken by the Reserve Bank of India. First one is leadership and supervisory functions. So the Reserve Bank of India only have the power to make the leadership and doing the supervisors. So under the leadership and supervisor functions, so we have studied the five types of the functions. So the India's representative in world financial organizations. So the India has the power, and India also will be in the need of having the financial ability. So as like all the other nations, the India also can have the power to borrow the money from the world financial organizations such as the IBRD, World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. But on behalf of the government, Indian government, the Reserve Bank of India only act as a representative in world financial organizations. Next, regulator and supervisor of Indian banking systems. So in this Indian banking systems, what are the needed decisions have to taken, and the decided decisions have to regulated and supervised by the Reserve Bank of India only. So next, the monetary authority. So the Reserve Bank of India only will issuing or formulating the monetary authority to stabilizing the economic growth and exchange rate. For the purpose of increasing or maintaining the economic growth, the monetary policy is very much important, because the monetary policy is considered as a macroeconomy policies. By providing the monetary policies only, so we can bringing the employment opportunity and the stabilizing economic growth and development and such things. So the monetary authorities also formulated and implemented by the Reserve Bank of India only. Next, closely monitoring economic parameters. In this economic parameter mean different type of the functions are there. The production levels, the trade cycles, foreign investment, and balance of payment, balance of trade, financial markets, are everything have to monitored by the Reserve Bank of India only. Next, the traditional functions. So in these traditional functions also, the four type of the activities undertaken by the Reserve Bank of India. So first, under the traditional function is the banker and the financial advisor to the government. On behalf of the government, the Reserve Bank of India only acting as a banker. So normally, the commercial banks are having the dealing with the customers and their individual persons. So like that, the government also will be in need of having one of the bank. So on behalf of the government, the Reserve Bank of India will be act as a bankers to the government, and some of the advisors, the financial advisors, whenever they need the finance and wherever they have to allot some reasonable amount. So such as advice is provided by the Reserve Bank of India only to the government. Next, monopoly of note issues. We know the Reserve Bank of India only will be issuing the note issues, and in the same time, so the RBI only having the power to issuing the currency notes. So except the 1 rupee note, all the currency is issued by the Reserve Bank of India only. So when they are issuing the currency notes, they have to consider all other economic aspects like the stock of gold and the circulation of money and the inflationary situations. Everything has to be considered. Next, bankers bank. So all the commercial banks can have the power and will be able to lending the money to the individual peoples. But even though the commercial banks also will be in need of having the more money, and sometimes they will be stuck in the sufficient or insufficient level of the monies. So when they are having like so, the commercial banks will be in need of having one bank or will be in need of borrowing the money from any of the financial institutions. So in these situations, the Reserve Bank of India only act as a bankers to all the commercial bank. Next, controller of credit and liquidity. So the credit is also have to be controlled by the Reserve Bank of India. And the liquidity of money or the circulation of money in our nations must be come to the control. So then who will control the credit facilities? So the credit facilities is controlled by the Reserve Bank of India only. So on the basis of the Reserve Bank of India and the guidance of the Reserve Bank of India, so it will be taking the 4 types to reducing the credit. First one is for credit for reducing the credit control. It will be using the 2 type of the methods. First one is quantitative method, another one is qualitative method. So yesterday we have studied the quantitative method. So under the quantitative method, so first it will be used the bank rate policies. So bank rate policies mean so the rate of interest for the loan providing by the commercial banks. So normally the commercial banks only will be lending the loan to the individual peoples in which is some of the rate of interest. But if the Reserve Bank of India want to reduce the rate of interest or the amount of credit, so it will be increasing the bank rate. So next the cash reserve ratio. So normally all the commercial banks must be having some amount of some percentage of the money submitted into the Reserve Bank of India. So in the point of reducing the credit amount, the Reserve Bank of India will be fixing the high reserve ratio and the open market operations. So the open market operations also will be undertaken by the Reserve Bank of India only. So on the basis of open market operations, the RBI will sell and buy the debentures on behalf of the government. So when the inflation time, the RBI will selling the government securities. So when they are selling the securities, the government, the money will come to the government hands from the publics. So on the controversy in the deflation time, so it will be selling the selling the debentures to the public. When they are selling the debentures to the public, so the Reserve Bank of India will be get some of the money. So next the qualitative credit control measures. So on the quantitative credit control measures, the bank rate policy, cash reserve ratio, statutory liquidity ratio, and the open market operations, So under the qualitative credit measures, so the Reserve Bank of India will undertaking some of the actions. First one is rationing of credit. So the maximum limit is fixed for lending to certain sectors or the specific purposes. The Reserve Bank of India will give some of the limitations to providing the loans to the special purposes or some of the certain sectors. So the normally commercial banks will providing the money to all the sectors, even industrial sectors and the agricultural sectors or the service sectors, and those who want to borrow the money they will give. But some of the time, if the Reserve Bank of India want to bring the credit under the control, so it will be fixing the rationing of credit. So under the rationing of credit, so the Reserve Bank of India will impose to the commercial bank to reducing the credit amount. Next, marginal requirement. So the marginal requirement refers to the percentage of the value of securities submitted before issuing the loans. The value of securities must be reduced before issuing the loans. So when they are issuing the loans, so they have to submit some of the securities. So when the securities has some of the marginal value, this marginal value will be reduced or increased on the basis of the inflation and deflation time. Next, direct actions. So the Reserve Bank of India takes some of the corrective actions on any bank or banks that does not follow its guidelines. It is called direct actions. As a commercial bank, he has more power. It must be obeyed to the Reserve Bank of India. So after providing some of the guidelines, if some of the commercial banks are not obeying or not following the guidelines of the RBI, so the RBI will take some of the actions directly. Next, moral suicide. So under this matter, the Reserve Bank of India puts pressure on the banks towards liberal or restricted lending during the certain periods. So the RBI will be forcing the commercial banks to providing or reducing the credit amount on the basis of certain period. Certain period mean, so on the basis of the inflation time and the deflation time. In inflation time, the Reserve Bank of India will force the commercial bank to reduce the credit facilities. In the same time, the deflation time, so the RBI will force the commercial bank to liberal to providing the loans. So like the quantitative credit control measures, so the RBI also taking the qualitative credit control measures. So under these qualitative credit control measures, it will be taking the rationing of credit and the marginal requirement and direct actions and the moral suicides. So by using these four measures, so the Reserve Bank of India try to bring the credit under the control. Next, the lender of the last resort. So the traditional another one of the traditional function is lender of the last resort. So last resort mean what? So if the commercial banks doesn't have the sufficient level of the finance, so if it is need some amount of money or the finance, so the Reserve Bank of India only act or being as a last resort to lending the money to the commercial banks. So in times of emergency, any bank in India can approach RBI for financial assistance. The Reserve Bank of India provides them credit when other sources of getting credit are exhausted. So all banks can attain loan from Reserve Bank of India, and hence it is called lender of last resort. Because the commercial banks can have the powers and some of the way to creating the sufficient level of the finance. So normally it will be collecting the deposit from the public and it will be issuing the debentures and the securities, and some of the bank also issuing the shares. By issuing the different type of the debentures, it can able to collecting the money. But sometime if it is not able to collecting the money from any of the way, so it can able to approach the RBI to providing the money, so borrowing the money. So the RBI also act as a lender of last resort to the commercial banks. Next, clearing house services. So the RBI acts as a clearing house and maintains a clearing system for all commercial banks in India. First, you have to know about the clearing house services. Clearing house services means now we can change all the demand draft checks and any of the debentures and the bills of exchange from any of the banks. So we can change the demand draft issued by one bank, but which is collected from the other banks. So when they are collecting and when they are transferring the checks from one bank to another of the banks, so some of the problems may come. So this problem arised or eliminated by the Reserve Bank of India. So when the Reserve Bank of India eliminating or removing the problems arised from the among the banks, only is considered as a clearing house services. So the aggregate amount of checks presented by a bank on other banks represents the claim by the bank on other banks. Similar, the claims are made by all the banks on every other bank in clearing. A net settlement is arrived at the clearing house and accordingly the debit or credit entry is made in their current accounts. So some of the other matter is no need. So the clearing house services also is provided by the Reserve Bank of India only. Next, custodian of foreign exchange. The custodian of foreign exchange. The Reserve Bank of India maintains a reserve of gold and foreign currencies. When foreign exchange reserves are inadequate for meeting balance of payment problem, it borrows from the International Monetary Fund. So normally in our nations, those who all want to involved in this international trade, they must be having some amount of the foreign currencies to pay to the another nations. So instead of any of the separate entrepreneur, the government only have to pay the foreign exchange. Otherwise, the government only have to take the responsibility to maintaining the reasonable or the equal foreign exchange. So whenever we have in need of foreign exchange, the Reserve Bank of India will be providing the foreign currencies. So it also administers exchange control of the country and enforces the provisions of Foreign Exchange Management Act 1999. So the International Monetary Fund and this World Bank and some of the banks are there to collecting the foreign exchange. How much amount of foreign exchange we have required, so we can collect by the World Bank, but we can't directly collect. So on the basis of the international trader and our nations, the Reserve Bank of India only collect and it will be paid. So the Reserve Bank of India is considered as a custodian of foreign exchange. Next, maintenance of foreign exchange rate. The RBI only manages the exchange value of the rupee in order to facilitate India's foreign trade and payments. So when we are involving in this international trade, so the foreign exchange rate must be maintained. So the equal foreign exchange rate must be maintained. So the foreign exchange rate is also maintenance by the Reserve Bank of India only. It ensures that normal short-term fluctuations in trade do not affect the exchange rate. Next, the collection and publication of data authenticate. So RBI has also been entrusted with the task of collection and compilations of statistical informations relating to banking and other financial sector of the economy. So all other financial sectors have to issue their audit and they have to take some of the research analysis. So on behalf of the banking or the nations, the statistical informations and some of the data is collected by the Reserve Bank of India only. So RBI also monthly bulletin, annual report and various committee reports contains treasures of authentic data. So on behalf of the nations, on behalf of the government, the Reserve Bank of India only have to be the responsibility to collect all the data related to the finance and growth of economy. Next, promotional functions of Reserve Bank of India. So first one is the nurturing banking habits among peoples. The Reserve Bank of India also having one of the responsibilities. So it is not considered as a responsibility, but it also helpful to maintain the banking habits among the peoples. So the RBI protects the depositors' interest and aim at providing cost-effective banking services in order to include more people to avail banking services. So when the Reserve Bank of India introduced the different type of the deposits or different type of the methods of deposit and the loan facilities and providing the high rate of interest for the public deposit, so all the people will have the power and get the interest to doing the saving the money in their bank. So normally if they having some amount of the money in their hand, so it will be considered as a ideal money. So the bank also considered and it will be created the habits, the saving habits among the peoples by providing the different type of the rate of interest and the different providing the different type of the services and some of the concessions. Next, grievance settlement of measures. So the Reserve Bank of India has appointed 20 banking ombudsmen in 20 states capital. So the banking ombudsman scheme is a speedy and inexpensive forum for the resolution of customer complaints relating to certain services rendered by banks in India. So normally all the commercial banks are also providing different type of the services. When they are providing services, the consumers may or may not have get the satisfactions and they will have some of the complaints. So when they are not getting the satisfactions and if they are having the types of the complaints, so they can approach the ombudsman services. So when they are approaching the ombudsman services, the complaints will be settled and the satisfactions also may be provided by the ombudsman. So this ombudsman service is also provided by the Reserve Bank of India only. When the Reserve Bank of India providing the ombudsman service or after providing the ombudsman service only, the complaints among the customers was abundantly reduced. Next, agricultural development. So agricultural industry is specified as priority sector by the RBI. But even in our nations are giving the more importance to the industrial sector, so the agricultural sector also have to be focused. So on behalf of the government, the Reserve Bank of India providing many facilities and concessions and subsidies to the agricultural and the farmers. They are introducing the many services and facilitates to the farmers and the agricultural sectors. The loans of all scheduled banks should consist of a percentage of loans to priority sectors. Even many of the industries are there. The all commercial banks have to provide some percentage of loans to the agricultural sectors. It is by the guidelines of the Reserve Bank of India only. Next, to promotion of small scale industries. The micro, small and medium scale enterprises are included in the priority sector because many of the cottage industries and the small scale industries are related to the agro based industries. So now if you are considering the cottage industries and the small scale industries, the all type of the raw materials is coming from the primary sectors. So the wastage of the primary sector is also will be used into the cottage and the small scale industries. So the RBI also focusing on the development of small scale industries. Next, facilitates foreign trade. So the Reserve Bank of India has simplified the rules for credit to exporters through which they can now get long-term advance from banks. So even the small entrepreneurs or the poor entrepreneurs also will have the power to borrow the money from the Reserve Bank of India. And the Reserve Bank of India also simplified the rules for credit into the exporters. So when they are simplified the rules, So even the poor entrepreneurs also can become as exporters. It supports to the cooperative sectors. So the Reserve Bank of India helps to cooperative banks by relaxing their rules and providing indirect financing. So already we have studied the cooperative sectors. The members of cooperative sectors only have to collect all the required amount. But even though the Reserve Bank of India providing some amount of money or some financial facilities to the cooperative sectors indirectly and directly. So when they are giving the financial assistance to the cooperative sectors, the poor people and the cooperative sectors also will be improved. So the sixth type of the promotional functions also undertaken by the Reserve Bank of India. Okay student, I think it's enough. If you have any doubt, please ask me, and you take the promotional functions as your study portions. Thank you.